All right, so Alan is now going to take some of the alcohol that we have here for glue pulling and prep the underside of the panel, just to make sure there's no grease and we're looking for maximum adhesion. All right, everybody, so we're going to have Alan go ahead and apply the stability plate right to the edge of that brace. So the dent is actually not perfectly centered, however, it's close enough where it will be just fine. So we did a big enough plate here that gives us some real estate to work with. Just a note here, I did cut the glue underneath the brace on that edge. I was just kind of worried that would be a tension spot there that we would have to contend with later on, and I didn't want to have to deal with it with our panel right up against it. So right there's a stability plate, nice and stuck on there. I mean, that is a strong, strong bond there. And this is where the magic happens. So now we actually have the panel is strengthened from this plate, and we have that little bitty gap that I was talking about right here. So what we're going to do, we're going to come to the top side and we're going to try to tap our dent. And potentially we might have to tap through the aluminum a little bit. So essentially we're going to be treating this just like if the panel didn't have a plate there. We're actually going to fix the dent with this secondary stability panel, or this secondary strengthening panel. We're actually going to just continue repairing the dent like we normally would. You might notice that if you do have to push on the back side of this, you're going to have to push a little bit harder. You're pushing through 2 panels of metal rather than 1. And whenever you're tapping on the top surface, you're just going to notice it being much, much stronger during the tapping process. So anyhow, let's jump up here and get started on it. All right, everybody, so here is our high spot. One thing you're going to notice is that when you start tapping on it, you're not going to lose it like we were before. So you just want to tap it down real nice and clean, and might do a little cross-checking over here. I mean, that is pretty close to flat. I'm going to jump off here and let you take a look at it in the other lighting, the cross-checking angle, and I'm going to kind of show you what I'm still contending with here, and then I'm going to teach you a little bit about pushing through the panel and working it that way as well. All right, everybody, so with that stability panel in place, we were able to get it real nice and flat to the panel. However, we still have a few little spots in here that can be picked clean. It's really close to orange peel at this time. So I mean, this is way, way zoomed up on the panel. Right here is our tight reflective angle. Looking really nice on that hard line right there. All right, everybody, so as you can see here, we got this little bitty low coming in at this cross-checking angle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and use the Mark Circus tool here, and I'm going to apply it to the underside of this aluminum panel, and I'm going to go ahead and push it up. Probably going to have to do a little bit of knockdown work, but I think this is what we're going to need to finish this one off. And I'm definitely glad we were able to do this, because I wanted you to see exactly how that works. So I'm going to be pushing through the 2 panels to bring up that little low. All right, everybody, so as you can see, I was able to push that into a nice high spot. So again, as usual, I'm gonna go in here and just tap it right on down. All right, everybody, so there you have it. We were able to push that dent up. Now I'm gonna let you know that it was much, much stronger when pushing through that aluminum panel. You're definitely going to want to be careful with that, especially if you're using the gutter hook on the edge of the panel, because when you're pushing that strong, you do have, it is likely that you could push a dent with the gutter hook. So when you get to this point where you got to make big, strong pushes, definitely find yourself where you can hang an S-hook and an O-ring and use that as your leverage point. So anyhow, we're going to take a final look at this panel here, and we'll finish up this part of the tutorial. All right, everybody, here is the finished product on the oil can stability technique. You can see here, it's really decently close. Again, this is one of them situations that if we like to, we could take out the texture and just sand it out just a little bit to finish it up. But the important thing is, going through the panel here, you see sometimes I can't even find it, right here. No oil can. The panel has been strengthened, and it's maintaining its original shape. So you can take this car through a car wash, you can do, drive it down the highway, wind flopping on the hood, and you have got strength back in that panel. Now, just looking at the underside here, you can see some of the little pushes that I made here. I'm going to show you what I need you to understand about this is that these little pushes right here are miniature dents. So if you look on the underside of the panel there, I essentially, when I pushed that up with that sharp circus tool, we made a dent here, and that dent is bridging the gap between the squishy stuff right here, between the squishy double-faced tape and this, and then tapping that down. Once we tapped it down and got the dent all the way out, we needed to pick a few spots. So this is kind of bridging that gap in between the panel, the squishy tape, and the dent, making it perfectly flat. Now you can take auto hammers up on here and actually hit this thing really good if you really need to get a nice arch in it. That's up to you. But something else you got to realize, when you're tapping on the top side of the metal, you're going to tap through and knock it down as well. So essentially, again, I just treated this like I normally would and pushed it out with a tool. Be careful though, again, don't use the gutter hook at this point. You will create a long dent on the edge of the hood. You do have to push 2 or 3 times harder, and just don't do that. Something you can do here as well, this right here is just a practice junk hood that we have in the shop. But you could also put undercoating over this whenever you're finished, or whatever type of coating you feel you would deem necessary. This would have a hood liner installed over top of it, but I even think a little bit of undercoating on this might just make that look a little bit nicer on the back side of the panel. So anyhow, guys, you've seen it here. This right here is the stability needed, and I just want to compare this. There was folks in the past that would actually use glue, and they would use different types of material to do that. The problem with glue, it doesn't have any squishy effect like this double-faced tape. Again, that's very, very important. Glue just hardens, and when you tap it, the whole thing moves, and it really disrupts the entire panel. This right here, when you tap the squishiness in between this and the metal, or in between this and the aluminum, it just sets itself right down in that one specific spot, so it doesn't move anything around it. So you can really isolate and begin targeting the stability work when you're in here finishing the dent up. So anyhow, guys, that is it for the end of this panel strengthening tutorial here. And I'm just going to tell you guys, I think I'm switching to aluminum. This reacted much, much better than the 16 gauge steel. Although the 16 gauge steel was stiffer, this aluminum, it just, I like the way it isolates the dents. It doesn't over mold the circumference, so you can really target with this. So this right here is my new official, you guys seen it first here, panel strengthening plate of choice is now aluminum. We're going to go ahead and finish up this tutorial on Oil Can Dents 101. Some of the things that we learned during this process here is that number one, you're going to be doing your shrinking with a very sharp tip tool. As you can see, I used the Mark Circus tool for nearly the entire duration of my open panel repairs. However, you can also use a whale tail. You just got to take your time. You notice the dent that I used the whale tail on was a little bit bigger, a little bit deeper, but it did take quite a bit longer using that whale tail. And I don't think the finish came out quite as good as the one that we were using the very, very sharp tip. However, it works excellent. The next thing that we learned is that when you do go into the depths of oil canning a dent, you want to try to minimize that with the stability techniques that we've used in this tutorial. Now, we didn't go over the mini lifter technique. However, it's pretty self-explanatory. You're actually, snugging the feet right up to the edge of the dent, and you're creating stability on the outside of the panel. Truly, that's my last resort because I do prefer having stability on the rear side of the panel. It just seems like you can really strengthen it. Another thing that we learned is that the wedge gives tremendous stability. In fact, if you noticed in our video, it actually brought the dent up probably 50% so we could actually see the impact point, the core. Next thing that we learned is that when one does go there, you're going to have to use a plate on the underside of the vehicle to stabilize that, to bring strength back into that panel. The tape, the double face tape, you want to use very strong, at least 20-pound hold, and it gives you a little bit of a window there, a little squishiness between it and the metal panel, the aluminum panel that we used here today underneath of it, to where you can tap and lay it right into it. And as you can see there, once you add that plate, you've actually strengthened that panel right back to where it was to begin with. So again, that's always our last resort, and we wouldn't normally do that on a hail damaged car, a retail end. In fact, I'm in a body shop, we would paint it or fix it traditionally. But there's some situations where you might talk to the client and customer and say, hey, I got this technique that I can stabilize it from the underside of the panel, and it would be okay if I use that. Because there's some folks out there who do not want paint repair at any cost. And I think this would be a perfect in that situation as well. I really enjoyed having you here for this tutorial, Oil Can Dents 101, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.